Good afternoon, friends. We are learning our subject Data Mining 3160714. And in that, we are learning module 5, that is cluster analysis, right? Clustering analysis. So in previous lecture, we have seen the introduction about clustering analysis as well as the types of the clustering approaches, right? They were the partitioning approach, hierarchical approach, density-based approach, grid-based approach, model-based approach, frequent pattern-based approach, user-guided or constraint-based approach, and link-based approach, right? So now we want to know about partitioning approach, that is partitioning algorithms, the basic concept. Partitioning method, what it is? Partitioning a database D of n objects into a set of k clusters such that the sum of square distances is minimized, where Ci is the centroid or middoid of the cluster Ci. So for that, what do we say? That is E is equal to sigma I is equal to 1 to k sigma p belongs to Ci and p minus Ci whole square. What we are trying to do is we are trying to minimize the square distances. Fine. Given K, find a partition of K clusters that optimizes the chosen partitioning criteria. That is global optimum. Exhaustively enumerate all partitions. Heuristic methods, what they do is, or what the methods are, they are the K-means and K-middoids algorithm. K-means, that means each cluster is represented by the center of the cluster. K-middoids or partition around middoids algorithm. So what is there in it? That is each cluster is represented by one of the objects in the cluster. Now, K-means clustering algorithm we have studied, even with the numerical example also we have studied. Just a recall, given the K-means algorithm is implemented in 4 steps. First is partition objects into K non-empty subsets. Compute the seed points as the centroids of clusters of the current partitioning. Assign each object to the cluster with the nearest seed point and go back to step 2. Stop when the assignment does not have any change, right? We have talked of that we were using the mean point, right? And then after what we were doing, we are finding the distance with whatever K clusters are there. Wherever the distance is less in that particular cluster, we move our data point, right? And we stop this algorithm when no further changes are there, right? That is, there is no movement of data object from any cluster to other cluster, right? So the example of K-means clustering, we can see here, say this is the initial data set, say K is equal to 2. So arbitrarily partition objects into K groups. Let's say we have partitioned the data. Here we can say that this we are able to see as one cluster, this we are able to see as other cluster, right? Update the cluster centroids. How we do that? That is, we are finding the mean point, isn't it? And then after we check the distance with the clusters centroids. And what we do is we reassign the objects. We move the objects from one cluster to other. When we move the cluster point, when we move the data point to other cluster, when the distance of that point is less for other cluster, right? So we move the point to other cluster. Then after, update the cluster centroids. That is, whatever centroid we have calculated before, we update them, right, with the new data points available, right? Then after, loop if needed. That means we are again going to this particular portion, again check for the distances, whether the distances are less or not for other clusters. If it is so, then we move to that, we update the centroids, and this way the process is going on till we do not have any change available, right? So this is what is the process or example for K-means clustering, right? Through the figure also we can explain, isn't it? Now, what do we say about the K-means method? This is what we have just studied. The strength is, it is efficient. It is of order TKN, where N is number of objects, K is number of clusters, and T is number of iterations, right? And normally, K and T both are less than N, right? Both are less than N. That is, we can say it is very much less than that of the number of objects, fine? If we compare that with partition around middoid, then it is of order k into and k minus square, and for Clara it is order of ks square plus k into n minus k, right? So what do we comment is often terminates at a local optimal, right? What is the weakness of this algorithm? That is applicable only to objects in a continuous n-dimensional space using the K-modes method for categorical data. In comparison, K-medoids can be applied to a wide range of data, right? So it is, though having the strength as the time complexity is less, but it is applicable to what do we say is, it is applicable to only the categorical data, whereas the K-medoid algorithm is applied to wide range of data. Fine. So need to specify K, that is the weakness. The number of clusters in advance, and we cannot automatically determine the best K. But there are ways. There are ways to automatically determine the best K, but otherwise, simply we can say is we are deciding it ourselves, right? If you use the automatically determining methods, then you can do that, right? Sensitive to noisy data and outliers. Outliers are the data objects that do not follow the normal behavior of the objects, right? Not suitable to discover clusters with non-convex shapes, fine? So now we want to know about the variations of the K-means method. Most of the variants of the K-means which differ in selection of the initial K-means, dissimilarity calculations, strategies to calculate cluster means. Handling categorical data, K-modes, replacing the means of clusters with modes. See, one more algorithm we are talking of is K-modes. So in k-means what we were doing, that is replacing means. In k-means we were using the means. Now if we are talking of the k-modes algorithm, then we are replacing means of the clusters with k-modes. Modes, I mean. We already know how to find the mode, right? Using new dissimilarity measures to deal with categorical objects. Using a frequency-based method to update modes of clusters. Frequency, we know that when the frequency of a particular number is biggest one, I mean to say that, say we are having few numbers, we find the frequency of each and every number, and whichever number is having the biggest frequency, that we consider as the mode of the cluster, right? Okay. A mixture of categorical and numerical data we can use, that is, we can say k-prototype method. So what is the problem with the k-means method? The k-means algorithm is sensitive to outliers. Since an object with an extremely large value may substantially distort the distribution of the data. K-medoids. Instead of taking mean value of the object in a cluster as a reference point, medoids can be used, which is the most centrally located object in the cluster, right? So we are talking of the PAM, partition around medoids, a typical k-medoids algorithm. Fine. So let us see the procedure of it. So we can calculate any numerical example also based on that, right? If we know the concepts. Okay. So k is equal to 2 is there. Arbitrarily choose k object as initial medoids. Any object we are choosing as the medoid. Fine. Okay. Now assign each remaining object to nearest medoid. Right? Assign each object to nearest medoid. We have considered k is equal to 2. That means we are having two clusters. Fine. Okay. So what we have considered is, say, this one point and this two second point. This we have considered as the medoid, and the data objects. Whatever data objects we are having, we find the distance with that medoid and find the distance and find the distance in the with the medoid and put that in that particular cluster. So this is cluster 1 and this is cluster 2, right? Based on the data object, we can say that in this cluster we are having these 3 objects, and in this other cluster we are having, say, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 objects, right? Now randomly select a non-medoid object O. Non-medoid object, right? Medoid object we have already considered 1 and 2. Now we consider any non-medoid object. Compute total cost of swapping. We have to consider whether the what we can say is distance with that new object is same or not, or you can say that any change will be there or not, that we should check. Nearer distance will remain in that. If they are not nearer, they will move to other cluster, right? So compute the total cost of swapping. Total cost is, say, 26. Swapping O and swapping O random is if the quality is improved. We will swap these two objects, that is the medoid which we have considered and whatever randomly we have selected. We swap them only if the quality is improved. That is the, what we can say is swapping cost, right? Swapping cost is 26. If the cost of that swapping is less, then only we will consider that swapping. Fine. So, and do this until no change is being found, right? So that was from the figure. Now, what do we say? K-middoid clustering method. In that, what do we consider? Start from an initial set of middoids and iteratively replace one of the middoids by one of the non-middoids if it improves the total distance of the resulting clustering. Right? Agar if the distance what we are finding after having the new non-middoid point or non-middoid object, if the distance, that is the cost which we considered, if it improves, then only we will do the swapping, right? Swapping of what? That old middoid will be replaced with the new random middoid. Random middoid doesn't mean that randomly we are taking any number. No, we are taking any non-middoid data object. Fine. Okay. So PAM works effectively for small data sets but does not scale well for large data set. Okay. Efficiency improvement on PAM. It is improving for Clara, the algorithm, PA on samples, Clarence, that is randomized resampling. These are also the algorithms which improves the PAM algorithm, right? Because we say that PAM is having the problem, some disadvantages, right? Which are the disadvantages? That is, it does not scale well for large data sets, right? So for that, we can say to improve the efficiency of PAM, we are having the two algorithms. They are the Clara and Clarence, right? Clara works with the PAM on samples. It considers samples and then works. And Clarence, that is randomized resampling is that, right? These two are the improvement for PAM, right? That is partition around middoids. Now next approach, that is the hierarchical clustering. Now what is that? Use the distance matrix as clustering criteria. This method does not require the number of clusters K as an input, but needs a termination condition, right? But needs a terminating condition, right? Okay, so now what happens, that is, first of all, what we are having, say we are having, say A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so what we do is we are making the hierarchical clustering. How do we do that? This is A, B, C, D. So that is a final output, isn't it? That is the final output. Okay. So what do we do for agglomerative clustering? What do we do is we consider say A and B. So that way we'll be able to make AB. Then after we'll consider C. C, not only C. We'll consider say DE, right? We consider say DE. That will make us DE. Combining C and this DE will make CDE. And then after we'll combine that with AB and CDE. That will make ABCDE, right? So that is there in agglomerative hierarchical clustering, right? Then what about the divisive or dyna hierarchical clustering? In that we are having ABCDE. Then we divide it in AB and CDE. Then we divide the CDE into C and DE. And then it will be divided into D and E, right? One is where the process is going from left hand side to right hand side, and in other, that is in the Diana, we are going from right hand side to the left hand side. Got the point? This is hierarchical clustering, where we are going from single data objects and combining it to the last one, that is called the agglomerative algorithm, and where we are going from all the 5 objects available to the single object, that is called the division, right? Here we are combining, here we are dividing, right? So this is agglomerative agenus, and here it is called the divisive dynamic, right? So let us consider the agglomerative nesting. Fine. What is that? It was introduced by the Kaufman and Rosev, implemented in statistical packages, and that is why in Python or any other languages we used to include such packages. Fine. It uses this single link method and dissimilarity matrix. It merge nodes that have the least dissimilarity. Least dissimilarity, that means more similarity, isn't it? More similarities. So go on in a non-descending fashion. Eventually, all node becomes to a same cluster, right? What we do is, first of all, let us consider that we are having, say, 5 objects are there. If we have considered, say, 5 clusters, then what we will do is we merge them, and at the end we will be having only one cluster. Well, all the nodes will be there in one cluster, right? In the same cluster. Okay. So here, say, we considered 2 clusters. So finally, we want to have, say, 2 clusters. Means this is the step. Okay. Ultimately, we have to have the all the nodes in the same cluster. Fine. Okay. So let's say that here we are having the clusters. This is 1, 2, 3. Fine. This is 1, 2, 3, 4. But after that, we'll merge it in a way that will be having these 2 clusters. Fine. So what we are trying to do is single clusters or separate clusters are there. We merge them in the way that at last they will be there in the same cluster. Fine. Dendrogram, it shows how clusters are merged. So decompose data objects into several levels of nested partitioning, that is tree of clusters, and that is called the dendrogram. Dendrogram is drawn this way. A clustering of the objects is obtained by cutting the dendrogram at the desired level, then each connected component forms a cluster, right? First of all, we consider, say, 2 nodes. 2 nodes combined, that will be, and added one more, that will be giving us this line, right? Let's say that in the past example, we have seen, say, A and B. So A and B are merged. Then after, you can say we are adding C, right? Then after, we can say that here this is A, B and C, right? A, B and C. So those will be combined here, right? But for that, here one more path is there. So we need to consider, suppose this is D, this is E. So this, here at this point it says D, E. Then after, we are combining this. So what we'll be having is D, E and say F. Then after, here say we are having G. So it will be having D, E, F and G, right? So here, after that, you can say, suppose here we are having H and I. So D, E, F, G, H, I. And here, what was the case? This was A, B, C. So A, B, C, then D, E, F, G, H, I. So all of them will be combined and that will be there in the same cluster, right? So this is called the dendrogram, where we are able to see the objects in several levels, right? This level we can see. This is the level. Then after it is combined and we are able to get this one. Again it is combined and we'll be able to see this level, right? So DINA, that is the divisive analysis introduced by Kaufman and Raziel, the same authors, right? Implemented in statistical analysis packages, inverse order of edginess. We have already seen, right, that both the algorithms work in the reverse way. Here we can say this is going from the step, you can see step 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That is for edginess, and for divisive or DINA we can say it is having reverse steps. This is 0, this is 1, 2, 3 and 4, right? So both works in the reverse way, right? So for DINA, what we say is it works in the reverse or inverse order of the edginess. Eventually, each node forms a cluster on its own, right? Now, distance between clusters, single link, smallest distance between an element in one cluster and an element in the other. Okay, that is the single link. Complete link, that means largest distance between an element in one cluster and an element in the other, right? What do we say is, for single link we consider smallest distance between element in one cluster and an element in the other, fine? So what do we say is distance between say Ki and Kj, that is minimum of say T, IP and JQ, right? Say P and Q are the points, right, to find the distances. So that's what we are representing here. For complete link, what do we say is largest distance between element in one cluster, that is the reverse of this first one, right? Here we have said that smallest distance between an element in one cluster, right, and an element in the other, right? For second, what do we say is largest distance between an element in one cluster and an element in the other, fine? The average length. What do we say about that? Average distance between an element in one cluster and element in the other cluster is the distance between Ki and Kj, that is average of TIP and TJQ, right? Centroid, that is the distance between the centroids of the clusters. Distance between the centroids of the clusters, that is distance of Ki Kj is equal to distance of Ci Cj, that is a centroid, right? Midoid, that is distance between the midoids of clusters, that is distance between Ki and Kj, that is equal to distance between Mi and Mj, right? Midoid, a chosen centrally located object in the cluster, fine? So centroid, radius and diameter of a cluster. Centroid is the middle of a cluster. Radius is square root of average distance from any point of the cluster to its centroid. So what do we say is TIP minus CM, not TCM, CM, that is a central, right? Central point. So difference between them, whole square, and for each and every I, right? I is equal to 1 to n, divide by n, take the under root of it, right? So average distance we can say from any point of the cluster to its centroid, right? Diameter, that is the square root of average mean squared distance between all pairs of points in the cluster, right? Now, strength and weakness extensions to hierarchical clustering. Major weakness of agglomerative clustering methods. What do we say that? That is, it can never undo what was done previously. Undo is not there. Do not scale well. Time complexity of E at least order of n square, where n is total number of objects. Oh God, too much. Integration of hierarchical and distance-based clustering. For that we can say BURCH. That is, it uses CFT, conditional FP tree, and incrementally adjust the quality of subclusters. Chameleon, hierarchical clustering using the dynamic modeling. Now, next is what we want to study is outlier detection. Outlier detection. The supervised methods. Two ways to categorize outlier based outlier detection methods. First of all, what is outlier? Outlier is data objects that do not follow the normal behavior of the system, right? So let us say that a person in your class is irregular, not submitting the things properly. If we say something like this, then that person is outlier. Assuming you all others are the sincere students, right? Okay, so that is an example of outlier. Based on whether user labeled examples of outlier can be obtained. As we are talking of the supervised methods of outlier detection, we have considered the user labeled examples. Whenever we have talked of the supervised methods, we need to consider the user labeled, right? Label must be there if we consider the supervised methods, right? Based on assumptions about normal data and outliers. That is, first one is based on the user labeled examples. Second one is based on assumptions about normal data and outliers. We are having the assumption that person who is sincere in attending classes, in submissions, in practicals, those students are the normal. And people who do not attend, who do not give the submissions in time, those are said as the outliers, right? For this example, we can say that based on the assumptions about normal data and outliers, right? These are the assumptions, okay? So statistical, proximity based and clustering based methods are used to have the what we can say outlier detection methods, right? First one is based on the supervised, semi-supervised or unsupervised methods, and the second one is based on typically clustering based methods, right? Now, outlier detection, say one, supervised methods. Supervision is there, okay? Class label is there. Then we want to do the outlier detection. Okay, so what is there in that? Modeling. Outlier detection is same as classification problem, right? Modeling outlier detection as a classification problem. Its samples examined by domain experts used for training and testing. Because supervision should be there, right? So what do we say is outlier detection as classification problem. That means samples examined by domain experts. Supervision is that, right? For training and testing. Methods for learning a classifier for outlier detection effectively. Effectively, what do we say is methods for learning a classifier for detection effectively. What do we do for that? Model normal objects and report those not matching the model as outliers. We are having the model which only fits the normal objects and which are not detected by it. Those simply are the outliers. Fine. I do not have the knowledge of who are the foreigners, but I know who are Indian people, right? So when people come to me, I know from their look or from their uh, mother tongue or whatsoever, I recognize that person as Indian. Okay, so other than the Indian, whoever comes, they are the foreigners for me, isn't it? The same thing is there that model normal objects and report those not matching the model as outliers. Fine. Model outliers and treat those not matching the model as normal. See, in this, we are having two things. One is we are model the normal objects and whoever are not matching, they are the outlier. Here in the second case, what we are doing is we are modeling the outliers. Person not attending properly. He is having attendance less than 50 percentage. Okay. Submission in that only 50% or less than that submitted for practicals for exams that person has given say less than 2 mid exams, right? So what we are doing is we are modeling the outliers, those characteristics we are modeling and treat those not matching this model, they are the normal, right? In this first one we model the normal objects and remaining as outlier. Here we are modeling outlier and remaining are the normal. You can see the difference, isn't it? It's very simple. So what are the challenges in that? That is imbalanced classes. That is outliers are rare. Boost the outlier class and make up some artificial outliers. In this, we can be having the imbalanced classes because it is typically the case that outliers are rare. So what is the challenge in that? This is the challenge, right? So what people used to do is boost the outlier class and make up some artificial outliers, right? Second one is catch as many outliers as possible. That is, recall is more important than accuracy. We have already seen what is accuracy, what is recall, what is precision, what is sensitivity, what is specificity, right? All those measures we have seen in previous lectures, right? So what we do is here catch as many outliers as possible. That is, recall is more important than the accuracy, right? Now, the second one is outlier detection using the unsupervised methods. Assume the normal objects are somewhat clustered into multiple groups, each having some distinct features. See, outliers are there, but Instead of they are there in one cluster, what do we say? That they are split among the few clusters. I mean to say that suppose in your class, we are having say 16 groups, right? Project groups. So what do we say? That they are the groups. In all the groups, we will find the rare or outliers. I mean to say that in each and every group, we can be having one member. Those do not follow the routine. I mean, they do not attend the lectures properly, they do not work regularly, they do not do the submission regularly, they do not appear for the mid exam, right? So these are the things, what do we say is, are the outliers. But instead of all of them are there in one cluster, they are in each and every cluster. So everywhere we can find one person. For example, right? I am not talking of in real scenario, but this we can understand that in each and every group, one or two members are like outliers, right? So that is what we are talking of. That assume the normal objects are somewhat clustered into multiple groups having distinct features, right? We are talking of the normal objects, okay? Normal objects are there in different clusters. I have given you the example for outliers. Here we are talking of the normal objects are somewhat clustered into multiple groups. In each and every group we are having good people, okay? And outliers is expected to be far away from any groups of normal objects. An outlier is expected to be far away from any groups of normal objects, isn't it? It is but obvious, because that only we used to say that outlier, that means which do not follow the normal behavior of the system, isn't it? So weakness, what is the weakness? It cannot detect collective outlier effectively. Normal objects may not share any strong patterns, but the collective outliers may share high similarity in a small area. Normal objects, okay, submission देता है, okay, mid exam appeared, attendance more than 50%, right? Something like that. What do we want to say is, normal objects may not share any strong pattern. It is normal pattern, right? But the collective outliers may share high similarity pattern in a small area, right? In some intrusion or virus detection, normal activities are diverse. Means unsupervised methods may have a high false positive rate, but still miss many real outliers. Supervised methods can be more effective, as for example, identify attacking some key resources. So many clustering methods can be adapted for unsupervised methods. Find clusters, then outliers not belonging to any cluster. What do is, we find the clusters, then outliers. They are the not belonging to any cluster, right? Problem 1 is hard to distinguish noise from outliers. Second one is costly, since first we have to do the clustering, right? But far less outliers than the normal objects. So it is very costly. Newer methods tackle outliers directly. Okay. So now the third way of outlier detection is semi-supervised method. What is that? Situation is, in many applications, the number of labeled data is often small. Labels could be on outliers only, normal objects only, or both. Whatever labels are given to us, in that we can say that for semi-supervised methods, what do we say is the number of labeled data is often small. Labels could be on outliers only, on normal objects only, or on both. Semi-supervised outlier detection, that is regarded as applications of semi-supervised learning. So a little bit labeled data, little bit not labeled data, isn't it? If some labeled normal objects are available, use the labeled examples and labeled examples, use it and approximate unlabeled objects to train a model for normal objects. Those not fitting the model of normal objects are detected as outliers. If only some labeled outliers are available, a small number of labeled outliers, many not cover the possible outliers well. To improve the quality of outlier detection, one can get help from models for normal objects learned from unsupervised methods. So let's see outlier detection statistical methods. Statistical methods, also known as model-based methods, assume that the normal data follow some statistical model. The data not following the model are outliers. Very simple, isn't it? So, say example, see in the right side figure. First use, say, Gaussian distribution to model the normal data, right? Gaussian distribution. Okay, for each object y in region R, estimate GD of y, Gaussian, right? Gaussian distribution of y. The probability of y fits the Gaussian distribution. The GD of y is very low. Y is unlikely generated by the Gaussian model and thus it is an outlier. Fine. So here we have used the Gaussian distribution model. Fine. Effectiveness of statistical methods, that is, it highly depends on whether the assumption of statistical model holds on the real data. See, I have assumed that the data is following the Gaussian distribution model, but is it really so? It may not be, right? So effectiveness of the statistical methods depends on the model holds for the real data, right? There are rich alternatives to use various statistical models, and they are parametric versus non-parametric. So next we want to know is proximity-based methods. An object is an outlier if the nearest neighbors of the object are far away. What do we say is an object is an outlier if the nearest neighbors of the object are far away. That is, the proximity of the object is significantly deviates from the proximity of most of other objects in the same data set. Nearest neighbors, right? If the nearest neighbors of the object, they are far away. If it is so, that means what? The proximity of the object is significantly deviates from the proximity of the other objects, right? Most other objects. Say for all these things, that is all these points, we can say that these 2 points deviates, significantly deviates, right? Significantly deviates from the proximity of most of the other objects. These 2 points, they are significantly deviating from the proximity of most other objects in the same data, right? This is the same data. From that, these 2 points deviates significantly, isn't it? Now, see the figure. Model the proximity of an object using 3 nearest neighbors. Objects in the region R are substantially different from other objects in the data set. Thus, the objects in R are the outliers. Fine. The effectiveness of proximity-based methods highly relies on the proximity feature. That is the measure, right? Proximity measure, not the feature, measure. In some applications, proximity or distance measure cannot be obtained easily. Often have difficulty in finding a group of outliers which stay close to each other, right? Two major types of proximity based outlier detection, and they are distance based versus density based. Now say outlier detection of third type, that is clustering based methods. Okay, so what do we say about that? Normal data belong to large and dense clusters, whereas outliers belong to small and sparse clusters or do not belong to any clusters. Normal data belong to large and dense clusters. Here we are talking of this is a large cluster as well as it is dense, and this is the outlier where we can say that small number of objects are there, as well as they are the sparse. They are not closely available. They are away from each other, and what or otherwise what we can say is they do not belong to any clusters. That also is possible. So in this particular figure, we can see all the points not in R from large cluster and the 2 points in R in a tiny cluster, and thus are the outliers. Fine. Since there are many clustering methods, there are many clustering based outlier detection methods as well. Clustering is expensive. Straightforward adoption of a clustering method for outlier detection can be costly and does not scale up well for large data sets. Let us clustering high dimensional data. Graph-based clustering. So graph-based clustering, that means say perhaps most robust for high dimensional data as it uses the distance on a graph, that is the number of shared neighbors, which are more meaningful in high dimensions compared to Euclidean distance. Fine. So say this is graph-based clustering. What is that? This is cluster 1, this is cluster 2, this is cluster 4, this is cluster 3, right? Here 1, 2, here 3, and here 4, right? Now, what do we say? The distance we can find, right? Say Graph-based clustering uses distance on a graph. A and F have shared 3 neighbors. Say A and F. We consider this A and this F. So how many neighbors they are sharing? They are having say D, C and B, right? These 3 neighbors they are sharing, fine? However, to build a graph, this method still uses the Euclidean distance. In addition, the number of clusters has to be implicitly specified a priori via the resolution's hyperparameters. Changing the hyperparameters can easily result in fewer or more clusters, which is somehow arbitrary and hence quite unsatisfactory, as there is no obvious way to define an objective function for automated tuning of the hyperparameters. Fine. So detecting graph elements with similar properties is of great importance, especially in large networks where it is crucial to identify specific patterns or structures quickly. The process of grouping together elements or entities that appear based on some similarity measure to be closer to each other than from the remaining elements is called cluster analysis, right? What do we do here is the process of grouping together elements or entities that appear based on some similarity measure to be closer to each other, right? That is, we are doing the clustering analysis, right? The similarity measure is usually calculated based on topological criteria. As for example, the graph structure or on the location of the nodes or other characteristics. As for example, specific properties of the graph elements. Nodes that based on this similarity value are considered to be similar are grouped into the so-called clusters. In other words, each cluster contains elements that share common properties and characteristics. The collection of all the clusters composes a clustering. Now here we can see the graphical clusters, right? This is say one cluster, this is second, this is third, this is fourth, this is fifth, right? And then after, what do we do is we are having the distance between the clusters, fine? Here to here, here to here, fine? Applications. Cluster analysis has many application fields such as data analysis, bioinformatics, biology, big data, business, medicine. However, each of these applications may consider differently the clustering notion, which is reflected by the fact that there exist many clustering algorithms or clustering models, right? And that is all about this module, that is clustering analysis, right?